العلم أشراف مطلوب وطالبه لله أكرام من يمشي على قدمه. العلم نور مبين يستضيء به أهل السعادات والجهال في الظلم.
السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. في الصلاة. طيب, so the Shaykh rahmatullahi alayhi was on the fourth obstacle, which was taking knowledge from those that are young. And those that are young have been interpreted into how many types? Two. What are they? Those that are young in age and Ahlul Bid'ah. So those that are young in age, we've talked extensively about why not to seek knowledge from them if we're able to find those that are older than them. As for Ahlul Bid'ah, the reason why you don't seek knowledge from Ahlul Bid'ah is simple. It's because they're upon the methodology of Ahlul Bid'ah. They're upon a methodology that contradicts the methodology of Ahlul Sunnah. And what is the point learning a certain science from a person, whether it's hadith or tafsir? What is the point studying that under a person of Ahlul Bid'ah and then losing your aqidah? And then being upon an aqidah that is fasid. For example, if you study under the Ash'ari or that deviant sect of the Ash'ari that negate the names of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala apart from the attributes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala except for 7, if you go to Ash'ari who's prolific in usul al-fiqh, who's good in usul al-fiqh, what benefit you can have after 2 years of being with him and then you start to say that Allah doesn't have these attributes, Allah is not this and Allah is not that, and you don't even know the meaning of La ilaha illallah Muhammadun Rasulullah. What is the benefit? So it's dangerous to seek knowledge under Ahlul Bid'ah. It is dangerous to seek knowledge under those that are Ahlul Bid'ah. Lakin, I reiterate, Ahlul Bid'ah, people that are Ahlul Bid'ah. Not people that every Tom Smith and Harry calls Ahlul Bid'ah. Because this word, Ahlul Bid'ah, or Mubtadi', it's an important chapter in the religion. It's a part of Aqidah. It's called Bab al-Asma' wal-Ahkam, where there's the chapter of naming what they are and the ahkam, the rulers that are pertaining to them. This is an important topic. Lakin, nowadays you find some people that everyone who's not with them is a mubtadi'. If you're in their jama'ah, in their masjid, then alhamdulillah, you're from the best of the best. But if you don't come to that masjid, then you're from the lowest of the lowest, and you're from Ahlul Bid'ah. So be aware of that as well. Be aware of studying with Ahlul Bid'ah. So ala kulli, the Shaykh rounds off this article, this obstacle by saying, for the student of knowledge, he has to be aware and wary of these individuals, and it is not just because someone gives a good khutbah or just because someone is famous, popular amongst the people, it doesn't mean that they are upon haqq. And just because they always shout at the top of their voices that we're the Salafis and no one else is Salafis, and we're the Salafis and no one else is Salafis, it doesn't change the reality. There's a qa'idah, al-haqa'iq, al-asma' names لا تغير الحقائق. Al-asma' لا تغير الحقائق. Names do not change the reality. You can name yourself what you want. You can name yourself what you want, who you want, and you can be with who you want. The haqiqah, the reality, won't change. What happens today if we name khamr, alcohol, if we say it's a refreshing tango juice? Will that change its reality? Is it permissible for us to drink? Why? Because the reality is that it is alcohol, regardless of the name. Likewise, names don't make the person. Names don't make the group. What makes the group is what they're upon. What makes the person is what he's upon or she's upon. And you have to make sure you're upon the Quran and the Sunnah, upon the understanding of the Sunnah. Al-A'iq al-Khamis, the fifth a'iq, the fifth obstacle, and this is extremely important. This is very, very important. This is probably the third most important a'iq. The first being al-Ikhlas, the second being acting upon that, and third, عدم التدرج في العلم. Not taking knowledge in stages. Not taking knowledge gradually. This is probably the third most a'iq in terms of importance in this book. يقول الشيخ رحمه الله: لا ترى أحدا من العلماء ينازع في مبدأ التدرج. You won't find anyone from the scholars disputing the concept of a tadarruj, the concept of taking knowledge gradually. Why is that? لأنه الوسيلة الناجحة لأخذ العلم, because it is the best way and the most successful way of taking knowledge. وفهمه, and to understand it. It is the best way to take knowledge and to understand it. وهذا مأخوذ من كتاب الله, and that is taken from the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, where Allah Jalla wa Ala says, وَقُرْآنًا فَرَقْنَاهُ لِتَقْرَأْهُ عَلَى النَّاسِ عَلَى مُكْثٍ وَنَزَّلْنَاهُ تَنزِيلًا. Allah Jalla wa Ala says, وَقُرْآنًا فَرَقْنَاهُ, and Quran that we have divided, لِتَقْرَأْهُ عَلَى النَّاسِ, so that you read it upon the people, you read to them, عَلَى مُكْثٍ, in intervals, in stages. وَنَزَّلْنَاهُ تَنزِيلًا, and we revealed it تنزيلا, يعني in stages. So the Quran of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was revealed through a duration of 23 years. The Messenger sallallahu alayhi wa sallam was receiving this revelation in stages. And in many of the ahkam of the sharia, in all of the ahkam, you will see the wisdom of why Allah legislated it in stages. مثلا al-khamar, alcohol. It wasn't made haram initially. It was made haram in stages. Firstly, they had a choice whether to not drink it. Then they had a choice, and they were told not to drink it. وَأَنْتُمْ سُكَارَى, don't come to the salah while you are drunk. So that left out some of the day, therefore they could only drink certain times. Then it was made haram. Jihad, مثلا. It wasn't made wajib in Makkah. Why? Because of the lack of ability. The Muslims did not have the ability, the power to defend themselves. The Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam advised them to go to migrate and go to Abyssinia and so on. Right? Then advised them sallallahu alaihi wasallam to migrate to Medina. However, when they got to Medina, it was legislated. Jihad was legislated. If you look at all of the ahkam to do with fasting, zakat and so on, they were legislated in Medina, and Hajj and so on. Hajj, for example, it was legislated in the 9th year. Before that, the mushrikun were many in Makkah, and they had the upper hand. And even after the Fatih, the conquest of Makkah, the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam still waited another year or two to perform Hajj. Why? To clean Makkah away from the kufr and the disbelief in the mushrikeen, the idols. So everything comes in stages. Likewise, seeking knowledge, it has to also come in stages. وقال تعالى, the Messenger, Allah Jalla wa Ala says, وقال الذين كفروا لولا نزل هذا القرآن جملة واحدة. When they were mocking and rebuking the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam, they said, this Quran, why doesn't it come down in one go? And why is it always ayah here, verse here, surah here, and so on? Because they obviously don't have the intellect of the Quran to understand and comprehend the Quran. That's what they would say. لكن Allah Jalla wa Ala says, وَكَذَلِكَ لِنُثَبِّتَ بِهِ فُؤَادَكَ وَرَتَّلْنَاهُ تَرْتِيلًا. Like Allah mentions the wisdom behind revealing the Quran in stages, so that it can be established in the hearts of the believers, so that their iman could increase, so that they can easily take these ahkam and the rules and regulations with ease. Can you imagine on the day that the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam, when Jibreel came to the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam with Iqra bismi rabbika alladhi khalaq, Iqra, that surah, imagine if the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam was to come to them and say, guys, what? You can't do this, you can't do that, you can't do this. Oh yeah, that you also can't do, and you have to do this, and you have to pray 5 times a day, and you have to go to Hajj, and so on. It would have been difficult for them. Lakin, when the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam gave them da'wah in stages, they were happy, they're more than happy to implement the sunnah of the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the sharia of Allah Jalla wa Ala. قال الزبيدي رحمه الله تعالى نقلا عن الذريعة في وظائف المتعلم, in this good book of الذريعة, he says, الزبيدي, he says, يجب أن لا يخوض, in talking about how to gradually seek knowledge, he says يجب أن لا يخوض في فن حتى يتناول من الفن الذي قبله على الترتيب ملغته. ببلغته أو حتى يصله ويقضي منه حاجته فازدحام العلم في السمع مضلة الفهم. He says it is wajib, it is compulsory that before indulging in one science, that you move over, before moving from one science to another, that you are well grounded in that fun, in that subject, and that you understand it. Ala tartib, in order. In order. Then you take the need that you have from that knowledge. So, for example, if you're studying usul al-fiqh, then you study that which concerns you, and that concerns you deriving ahkam and understanding the ahkam. When it comes to fiqh, you learn the ibadat and the mu'amalat, and so on. Then you can move on to other books. طيب. وعلى هذا قال تعالى, and because other than, like if a person studies so many different sciences in one go and different books in one go, then a person it will cause him to not understand. وعلى هذا قال الله تعالى الذين آتيناهم الكتاب يتلونه حق تلاوته. So on that note, we can understand the verse of Allah Jalla wa Ala in which He said, verily those that we have given the kitab, they are reading it as it should be read. They are reciting as it should be recited. Meaning in stages, and they're implementing it and so on. So he said, the Shaykh says, لا يتجاوزون فنا حتى يحكموه علما وعملا. They are not moving on from one subject until they perfect it. They learn it and they act upon it. فيجب أن يقدم الأهم فالأهم. It's important that he gives importance to the, he starts with the most important, then starting with moving on to the second most important. من غير إخلال في الترتيب, without juggling it, without mixing it up. وكثير من الناس, and a lot of the people, منع الوصول, they were prevented from understanding the foundations. لتركهم الأصول, منع الوصول لتركهم الأصول. They were prevented from understanding the foundations of each science. لتركهم الأصول, because they left off the foundations of every single science. And that is why, if you want to write this down, the Salafi, or the scholars say, من حرم الأصول حرم الوصول. من حرم الأصول حرم الوصول. Whoever is prevented and deprived from the usul, the foundations of every science, حرم الوصول, he has also been prevented from actually reaching his goal. From reaching his goal. And so when a person wants to learn, they look at the science that they want to learn. For example, if a person wants to learn fiqh, you can start off with, or you should start off with, a basic book, an easy book to understand. For example, Manhaj al-Salikin. If you start with Manhaj al-Salikin, say there are about 3,000 issues mentioned in there from the beginning to the end, and you understand these 3,000 Masail issues, you're now able to move on to the next book, the next level. And that next book may contain 4,000 Masail or 5,000 Masail. But in reality, you already know about, out of those 5,000, you know how many? You're already aware of 3,000 issues. Masail, Tahara, Ahkam, Tahara, Wudu, and so on. The other two are going to be something that you're going to learn in that stage. However, if you get a kitab, مثلا, the Mughni of Ibn Qudama, one of the scholars of the Hanabila, he has a book which is about 14 volumes, different prints. He has a book and it's called Al-Mughni. In that he talks about comparative fiqh. So he will talk about the madhab, the opinion of the Hanafiya, Malikiyya, the Shafi'iyya and the Hanabila. That's comparative fiqh. If you read that and you start with that, you're going to be lost and you're never going to be well grounded. You won't ever understand fiqh. You will never understand fiqh. So every subject that you study, you need to start from a beginning book. مثلا, if you want to study Aqidah, you don't start from Aqidah al-Hamawiyya or Tadmuriyya, which is one of the books, or some of the books of Shaykh al-Islam ibn Taymiyyah rahimahullah. Because these books are talking about Asma wa Sifat and he's refuting Ahlul Bid'ah and so on. And you won't understand what he's talking about. Like if you start from simple books such as Usul al-Thalatha, Qawa'id al-Arba', Nawaqid al-Islam, Kitab al-Tawheed, Aqidah al-Wasatiyya, Tahawiyya, these books, once you're studying them, you're going to learn the Aqidah of Ahlul Sunnah. Then you're going to be able to somewhere along the line understand these other books of Shaykh al-Islam Taymiyyah, such as Tadmuriyya and Hamawiyya. And you don't learn knowledge from refutations. The Aqidah of Ahlul Sunnah, you don't learn the Aqidah of Ahlul Sunnah by learning the refutations of Ahlul Sunnah against Ahlul Bid'ah. No, you don't. So you don't learn what the Ash'ari, what the Ahlul Sunnah said about the Ash'ari and the Mu'tazila and the Khawarij and the Sufiyya and so on. That's not the correct way. The correct way is that you first learn the Aqidah of Ahlul Sunnah. Once you learn the Aqidah of Ahlul Sunnah, then you can move on to other books. Then the Shaykh says, rahimahullah, وَتَدَرُّجُ يَكُونُ فِي أَمْرَيْنِ, and gradually seeking knowledge is of two types. And obviously write this down. الأول التدرج بين الفنون. التدرج بين الفنون. Gradually seeking knowledge between different sciences. Different sciences. So for example, Aqidah. You start off with Aqidah and Fiqh. مثلا, if you're a beginner student knowledge, these are the two most important topics you should start off with. Aqidah and Fiqh. Why? Because with Aqidah you will learn La ilaha illallah Muhammad Rasulullah. And with Fiqh you will learn how to pray. How to perform wudu. What nullifies the wudu. What to do if you make a mistake in salah. How do you perform sujood sahwi? You will learn these things. Like what if you say, I'm going to learn the 10 different qira'at, the 10 different ways of reciting the Quran, without even knowing how to pray? No. That's not the correct methodology. The second is تدرج في الفن الواحد. Gradually seeking knowledge in one specific science. So when you're studying, let's say you're studying fiqh only, you study fiqh in stages. Move on to one book, don't move on to the next book until you fully understand the book that you're studying. And that example of Manhaj al-Salikin and al-Mughni, Manhaj al-Salikin is like here and al-Mughni is like that. Here. So if you jump onto the Mughni and say, right, this is a shortcut, la. In reality, you will never attain knowledge. That's why when you look at the works of the scholars, or when you look at in Islamic universities, the way that the curriculum is set out, in most cases it gets harder and harder. So for example, in the first few levels you will learn about salah, wudu, tahara, salah, zakat. In the last stages you will learn about what? Qisas, jinayat, capital punishment and so on. And also, for example, you will learn about inheritance. How to inherit, who inherits if a person dies and so on, the conditions and the preventions of inheritance and so on. Like, can you study inheritance? Will it make sense to study inheritance and jinayat without even knowing how to pray? No. Forget about inheritance and jinayat, qisas. We don't even know how to pray. Pray first, learn how to pray in salah and zakat, and then move on to those subjects. وكلا الأمرين يخضع لاجتهاد المعلم وطبيعة المكان، لذا فإن إشارات العلماء في التدرج تختلف باختلاف مذاهبهم وأماكنهم. طيب, the Sheikh says something which is really important. All of these, or both of these, what to do? تدرج, gradually seek knowledge in one science and gradually seek knowledge in the sciences between different sciences. These two, he said, they go back to the teacher that's teaching you, what he would advise the student. And it also goes back to the place that you're in. It also goes back to the place that you happen to be in. So when the scholars are mentioning what you should study and how you should study it, and what books you should study, That is like a general framework. For example, if you're in a country in which the Shafi'i madhab is the one that is practiced and known, then you study fiqh al-Shafi'i. It's common sense. You study the fiqh of the Shafi'iyya. And you start with those short books, Safinat al-Najah, Matn al-Shuja', and so on, those sorts of books. If you do that, you're benefiting in the sense that you will find a teacher, and what you're learning is the fiqh, the madhab of the people that you're with. Again, the same goes for the Hanabila. If you're in a community that the Hanbali madhab is practiced, then study the Hanbali madhab and study the books gradually. Same goes for the Hanafi madhab and the Maliki madhab. And don't listen to what some people say where they say, we can't take knowledge from the madhab, or we can't study fiqh with the madhab. Or what they say, la, I don't have a madhab, I follow the dalil. Anyone that says that shows his ignorance. If by a person saying that, you automatically know that that person is ignorant. Like these madhahib, they're not based on dalil. Are they not based on dalil? يعني Imam Ahmed, Imam Abu Hanifa, Imam Malik, Imam Shafi'i, Imam Ahmed, يعني they weren't basing their statements, opinions on dalil. Like, what's the dalil that you've come to know after 1,200 years after their death? What dalil have you come to know that they didn't know? And in the UK, that is pretty common, where people belittle the madahib, al-arba'a. They belittle them, and they say that, no, it's no, we don't take madhab, we don't have a madhab, we have to take knowledge from the Quran and the Sunnah directly. Whereas if you ask him any mas'ala, he probably won't even know. And if you give him a mas'ala and he gives you the correct answer, that correct answer is probably the opinion of the Hanafi or the Maliki or the Shafi'i or the Hanabila. Like, what have you, what's Jadid? What new thing have you come with? You've given me an opinion that is already found in the books of the Fuqaha. So these great Imams and their great madahib is the easiest way for a person to learn fiqh and to be well grounded in fiqh. Don't listen to anyone that says to you, I'm learning from the Quran and the Sunnah directly. In reality, they won't understand the Quran and the Sunnah. And there are two ways of learning fiqh. Write this down. There are two ways of learning fiqh. Fiqh al-dalil and fiqh al-masail. Or in other words, to study fiqh using the books of the madahib. To study books using the fiqh of the madahib.
مسائل
مسائل فقه المسائل madhab.
Yeah.
Madhab is a methodology, a fiqh methodology that a person adopts in order to understand the Quran and the Sunnah in terms of Islamic law, jurisprudence, not aqidah. Fiqh, your salah, zakah, hajj. And the reason why there is these madahib is because they have different foundations and different principles. And the only reason why there's a difference in their ahkam is because there's a difference in their usul and their foundations. That is what the madhab is. Lakin, madhab is not, or when it comes to aqidah, there's only one madhab for Ahlul Sunnah wal Jama'ah. All four of these imams are on one aqidah, the aqidah of the Salaf al-Salih. The aqidah of the Salaf al-Salih. That's for their aqidah. It's only in fiqh that they have, that there's four schools of thoughts, of opinion, with regards to issues of fiqh. Lakin for aqidah, there's only one, and that is the methodology of Ahlul Hadith, Ahlul Sunnah, Al-Firqatul Najiyah, Ta'ifa al-Mansura, and so on, which is the aqidah of the Prophet ﷺ and the companions and the righteous Salaf. So if anyone says to you that the aqidah of the Muslims is three, the Sha'ir, the Maturidiyya, and the Ahlul Hadith, that is batil. That is incorrect. So that's the first way of seeking knowledge, learning knowledge, which is to learn from these books of fiqh. The second is that you learn fiqh through the ahadith al-ahkam. the hadith pertaining to wudu. And for example, studying directly from or learning Umdatul Ahkam, the book of Abdillah al-Maqdisi, or Bulugh al-Maram, the Sheikh Hafid, the Imam Hafid ibn Hajar. And there's a difference. Like in the best way, the scholars say, the best way is to learn from a madhab. Because once you learn from a madhab, you will be well grounded. Like in whichever one the person does, both are khayr, and there's goodness in both. قال أبو عمر بن عبد البر رحمة الله عليه إمام بن عبد البر he says طلب العلم درجات طلب العلم درجات ومناقل ومنتر. Seeking knowledge is levels, and it has paths. It is of levels and stages. لا ينبغي تعديها. It is not befitting for a person to pass these or this methodology and these stages. ومن تعداها جملة فقد تعدى السلف الصالح. And من تعداها, whoever passes these and moves away from this or transgresses against these stages, verily he has transgressed against the Salaf al-Salih. وَمَنْ تَعَدَّى سَبِيلَهُمْ, and this is a qa'idah that you might want to apply, because it's not only specific to seeking knowledge, like in everything. وَمَنْ تَعَدَّى سَبِيلَهُمْ, and whoever passes or transgresses and moves away from their path, عَامِدًا, intentionally, ضَلَّ. Whoever leaves their methodology intentionally and their path, ضَلَّ, then he would عَامِدًا, intentionally, ضَلَّ, then he would become misguided. وَمَنْ تَعَدَّاهُ, and whoever leaves it off, turns away from it, مُجْتَهِدًا, wants to do an ijtihad of him himself, reasoning, which he's obviously got he's a person who is able to do ijtihad, zalla, then he will fall into error. He will fall into error. Now this qa'idah is general in aqeedah, mu'amalat, in everything. So ala kullin, in general, it's important that you seek knowledge in stages, okay? And the books that you're learning, you make sure that you learn every book at least twice, minimum twice, preferably 3 or 4 times. Every book that you're studying, make sure you study it 3 or 4 times. If you study it 3 or 4 times, then you will be well grounded in that. Then you move on to the next book. And then you study the next book 3 or 4 times. And so on. Beware and avoid studying a book once. Stay away and avoid studying a book only once. Make sure you study every book a minimum 2 or 3 times. 2 is too short. 3. Minimum 3 times. And every time you study it, you will know and you will come to realize that you're benefiting more and more. Seeking knowledge is not a sprint, it's a marathon. Yes, that book that you're studying 3 times, it may take you an extra month and a half. Like in that month and a half is an investment. And it's better for you to be delayed a month and a half or 2 months than to be delayed 10 years. If you're going to lose time, is it better to lose a month and a half? You're not even losing time when you're seeking knowledge anyway. Like, if you're going to invest, is it better to, for your future, is it better to review a book and spend an extra month and a half, or to spend 10 years without benefiting? Which one? 1 month and a half. Studying it 2 or 3 times. And I'm saying this because a lot of times what happens in the UK is the methodology of seeking knowledge is not there. Why is that? Because when the youngsters want to learn, the one that is telling them to learn sometimes might not even know what to teach them. And he may not be well grounded himself. So you will find people, or you will hear some say, I've spent 10 years and I haven't benefited anything. I'm not making it up. This happens, not talking from outside of this world. This happens in our community in the UK. People spend 10 years and after 10 years they don't have a clue. They haven't memorized the Quran, or they can't even read the Quran properly. They don't know the Arabic language. They haven't studied many sciences. However, they've been going to every single lecture. And lectures, there's nothing wrong with that, with them. Attending lectures is good, it's a good reminder. Lakin it's important that you differentiate between durus ilmiya, knowledge-based lessons, and lectures. Even conferences are important. However, conferences, you don't learn Islamic knowledge. You learn Iman boosters. The only way that you won't regret your time is if you learn books in an organized way, in stages and gradually. Take my advice now, take this advice. It's not my advice, the advice of the scholars. Take their advice, or I'll see you in 10 years' time, and you're probably worse off than you are today. The choice is yours. Shabab, just like yourselves, have spent years and years and years being involved in fitan. And I'll talk about in the end some of the obstacles that face us as a community. So when you're learning, make sure you learn properly and make sure you're learning books. That is the only way that the ulama became ulama. Do you think Fawzan became an alim by going from one lecture to another for 50 years? Or do you think he became an alim from studying one book to another? Which one? Studying a book and a book and a book, book after book after book. That's why when you go abroad and you seek knowledge, they teach you books. Then you will realize the importance of books and the importance of durus ilmiya. And you're talking about, why did the Imam say this? Why did the Sheikh say this? What if this masala was to be like this? What if it wasn't like that? And why is this the stronger opinion? When you see that, or when you come across that, that is how you learn. Al-a'iq al-sadis, the sixth obstacle, al-ghurur wal-ujbu wal-kibr. To have pride, haughtiness, vanity, arrogance. These sorts of things are a prevention from seeking knowledge. They prevent a person from seeking knowledge. If a person is proud, the Salaf used to say, لا يجد ولا يتعلم العلم مستحي ولا مستكبر. A person that has haya, shyness in ilm, and a person that has pride and arrogance, he will not learn. Anyone that has these characteristics will not learn. The Shaykh says, معصية الله سبحانه وتعالى عائقة عن نيل العلم الشرعي. Sinning against Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's sharia is a prevention and obstacle to seeking knowledge. Why is that? لأنه نور الله سبحانه وتعالى يغذفه في أفئدة من شاء من عباده. Why? Because knowledge is a light that is thrown into the hearts of whom Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants from His servants. ولا يجتمع في قلب and نور وظلمة. And light and darkness and misguidance, guidance and misguidance won't be found in one heart. One has to prevail. ولذا قال ابن مسعود رضي الله عنه, because of that Ibn Mas'ud said, إني لا أحسب أن رجل ينسى العلم. That a man ينسى العلم, he forgets العلم. Why? قد علمه, العلم that he previously knew, بذنب يعمله. I believe that a person, he says in Muslim, loses knowledge or forgets knowledge due to a sin that he does. And from the greatest of these sins, the Shaykh says, rahimahullah ta'ala, that he'll come to that. وَرَحِمَ اللَّهُ إِمَامَ الشَّافِعِي حَيْثُ قَالَ Imam al-Shafi'i rahmatullah alayhi, he said, شَكَوْتُ إِلَى وَكِيعٍ سُوءَ حِفْظِي I complained to Imam Waki' al-Jarrah, his Shaykh, سُوءَ حِفْظِي, that's Imam Shafi'i. The fact, the weakness in my memorizing. فَأَرْشَدَنِي إِلَى تَرْكِ الْمَعَاصِي And he guided me to leaving off ma'asi and sins. وَأَخْبَرَنِي بِأَنَّ الْعِلْمَ نُورٌ And he advised me and he told me that ilm is nur, it is light. وَنُورُ اللَّهِ لَا يُهْلَى لِعَاصٍ And the light of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not given to a sinner. وإن أقبح ما تلبس به طالب العلم من المعاصي كلها وكلها قبيح التكبر والتعاظم والغرور فيزدري هذا ويترفع عن هذا ويتبختر في المشي ويتشدق في الكلام إلى غير ذلك من صفات العجب بالنفس التي نهى الله سبحانه وتعالى عنها حيث قال جل وعلا ولا تسعر خدك للناس ولا تمشي في الأرض مرحا إن الله لا يحب كل مختال فخور. The Shaykh فيزدري, so he scorns and he belittles this individual. ويترفع هذا, and he holds himself higher than this person. And he swings his arms when walking. And even in his statements, in his wording, you can tell that he has kibr in him. Where we find that the teaching of the Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, He prevented us from doing this. And He prevented us, He said, وَلَا تُسَعِرْ خَدَّكَ لِلنَّاسِ وَلَا تَمْشِ فِي الْأَرْضِ مَرَحًا Do not walk, do not have pride and do not walk with insolence, do not walk with arrogance with the people. Verily Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala doesn't like those that are arrogant and those that are boastful. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala warns us against it. Allah Jalla wa ala also says, the Shaykh says, تِلْكَ الدَّارُ الْآخِرَةُ نَجْعَلُهَا لِلَّذِينَ لَا يُرِيدُونَ عُلُوًّا فِي الْأَرْضِ وَلَا فَسَادًا وَالْعَاقِبَةُ لِلْمُتَّقِينَ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, this is the Dar al-Akhirah. The Dar al-Akhirah. It has been prepared and made for those that do not want to rebel and cause corruption and fasad and oppression on the earth. وَالْعَاقِبَةُ لِلْمُتَّقِينَ وَالْعَاقِبَةُ لِلْمُتَّقِينَ And the end result is for the muttaqeen. So when it comes to student of knowledge, his akhlaq, it should be the akhlaq of the Quran. These verses that the Shaykh mentions, they're from the Quran. When Aisha radiallahu anha was asked about the Messenger's character sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, she said, كَانَ خُلُقُهُ al-Quran. His khuluq was the Quran. His character, his manners, etiquettes, they were taken from the Quran of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So we should take our akhlaq from the Quran of Allah Jalla wa ala and the Sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. And it is not befitting that a person after seeking knowledge for about a week and a half or 2 weeks to think that he's better than everyone else and to believe that he's the alim and to believe that he knows everything and so on. Because when the more you learn, the more you realize you don't know nothing. Imam al-Shafi'i said, كل ما ازددت علما ازددت علما بجهلي. كل ما ازددت علما ازددت علما بجهلي. The more I learned of my ignorance. That's why the scholars talk about beware of ulama or shibr. Imam Shaykh Abu Bakr al-Zayd rahimahullah in his book Hilyatul Talib al-Ilm, he says beware of, or stay away from, avoid being of those people who are on the first shibr, the first inch. What does that mean? He says rahimahullah, ilm is of 3 inches or 3 meters, 3 stages. When a person enters into the first stage and he starts seeking knowledge, he thinks he knows everything. So you find him oppressing that one, and bullying that one, and saying I'm the person upon haqq and no one else is upon haqq, and so on. The next stage is that if a person reaches that second stage, he becomes humble. So he thinks he has knowledge, but he's humble. Then when the person reaches the third stage, he learns that he doesn't know anything. He comes to know that in reality he doesn't know anything. And that's the level of the ulama. So when the ulama are saying Allahu A'lam, they know their level. That's why a man came to Imam Malik anhu, and he said to him, he asked him about 40 questions or so, and he answered about 4 or 5. And they said, Ya Malik, what shall I tell the people? You're saying Allahu A'lam. He said, قل لي Malik لا يدري. Malik لا يدري. Say to them, Malik doesn't know. And if you look into Imam Ahmad's question and answers, the amount of times that you come across لا أدري, لا أحسن هذا, لا أعرف, Allahu A'lam, you'd be amazed. And that's Imam Ahmad. Okay, in this area we find that the most ignorant person amongst us, if he's asked about an issue to do with a whole ummah, he'll give a general fatwa. So he'll give a general fatwa over major issues that involve a whole family, a whole community, the breakdown of a marriage, the establishment of a marriage. Like if you were to ask him about sujood al-sahwi, he would say, Allahu A'lam, ask this individual. When you ask them about wiping over the socks, when the time for wiping over the socks starts, they may not know the answer. Or you ask them simple questions on inheritance or zakat, they may not know. Like when it comes to big issues, they will give you a wholesale answer. So it's important that the student of knowledge stays away from believing that they know everything. Allah, if only you knew that we know nothing. We genuinely know nothing. When you look at the scholars of the Salaf, and you look at the scholars, even the scholars that are around nowadays, and then you think of us, you would realize we don't know anything. So the best thing for us to do is to be quiet, to not have pride, to not have ignorance, to not belittle people, to not degrade people. Even if you see a misguided person, do not belittle him and think you're better than him. Say, Alhamdulillah, الذي عافاني مما ابتلاك به. Alhamdulillah, to Allah, praises to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that has saved you from that which He has tried you with and tested you. That's the only way. Like to move around, go around and start oppressing people and to believe that you're upon knowledge, then that's something that is not from the guidance of the Salaf. It was said to Umar ibn Abdul rahimahullah, Al-Aziz from the Dawla al-Umayyah, who was a righteous man and a righteous leader, إن مت ندفنك في حجرة النبي في حجرة رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم. If you die, we're going to bury you in the house of the Messenger صلى الله عليه وسلم, the place where Umar and Abu Bakr and the Messenger صلى الله عليه وسلم were there buried. And what did he say? He said, لأن ألقى الله بكل ذنب غير الشرك. Were I to meet Allah with every single sin other than shirk, أحب إلي من أن أرى نفسي أهلا لذلك. Me meeting Allah with all types of sins apart from shirk is better for me, better than me believing that I am befitting of being buried next to the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Believing that I am worthy of being buried next to the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So he's saying, me being buried next to the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam is crazy. It's out of this world. I'm not worthy of being buried next to the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Who is saying that? Umar ibn Abdul Aziz rahimahullah, a righteous scholar, a righteous alim, an imam, an abid. He was a worshipper. He had zub. It was said that in his era, there was no one to give zakat to. Zakat would get taken to people and they would say, "La, take it back. We don't have a need for it. There are no poor people here." And it would get taken from place to place, and everywhere they would say, "La, we're okay. We're well off." Why is that? Because of the justice that was widespread. He was given every haqq every person his haqq. But here you have him, and he also is from the scholars that commanded the other muhaddithin to write the hadith of the Messenger and combine them in books. Lakin مع ذلك, having said that, he still said that he's not worthy of being buried next to the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam. That's what it means to be a Salafi, to follow their guidance, to know that we're nothing compared to them, to know that guidance and goodness and khayr is in following their guidance. العائق السابع, the seventh ayah. استعجال الثمر, being hasty when seeking knowledge, being hasty in wanting to see the benefits and the fruits of your work. This is an a'iq, and it is an obstacle for a person to attain knowledge. So if a person believes that after studying for a year or two, and then they don't become an imam of the imams of Ahlul Sunnah, they think, Allah, what's the point of me seeking knowledge? So that is the meaning of this ayah, where a person hastens in trying to reap the fruits of seeking knowledge, where he wants to be an imam overnight. يقول الشيخ عبد السلام رحمه الله: يظن بعض طلبتي أن العلم لقمة سائغة. بعض الطلبة, they believe that knowledge is something which is easy, you just take in. Or they believe that it is a جرعة عذبة, يعني is some sort of drink that you can easily drink. سرعان ما تظهر نتائجها وتتبين فوائدها. And you will easily be able to see its benefit and reap its fruits. فيؤمل في قرارة نفسه أنه بعد مضي سنة أو أكثر أو أقل من عمره في طلب سيصبح عالما جهبذ لا يدرك شأنه ولا يشق غباره. So the person, because of believing that it's easy to attain knowledge, he thinks that after a year or maybe a little bit more or a little bit less, that they will become a alim, an imam, a mountain of knowledge who no one can reach in terms of the knowledge that they have attained, and that they don't have anyone that's equal to them. So some people believe that, the Shaykh says. وَهَذِهِ نَظْرَةٌ خَاطِئَةٌ, and this is a wrong mindset, this is wrong. وَتَصَوُّرٌ فَاسِدٌ, and a corrupt outlook. وَأَمَلٌ كَاسِدٌ, and it is empty ambition. أَضْرَارُهُ وَخِيمًا, its harms are severely dangerous. وَمَفَاسِدُهُ عَظِيمًا, and its problems and its harms are great. Why is that? إذ يفضي بصاحبه إلى ما لا تحمل عقباه من القول على الله بغير علم والثقة العمياء بالنفس وحب العلو وتصدر, يعني إلى حب العلو وتصدر. It guides to, or it leads to the person doing things that are not praiseworthy, such as talking about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the Messenger without knowledge, and also to have blind self-confidence. So a person is confident, like his confidence is based upon ignorance. And also the hubb of al-ulu wa tasaddur, or the love of being put forward and standing in front of the people and teaching and being followed and so on, and loving them. And Imam al-Ma'mun said, who was one of the leaders, whilst rebuking those people that say that or believe that you can be an imam in a few days, يطلب أحدهم الحديث, one of them will seek hadith ثلاثة أيام, for 3 days. ثم يقول أنا من أهل الحديث. Then he will say, I am from Ahlul Hadith. So Ma'mun is saying, these young shabab, not you, but those people that he was referring to, they will learn hadith for 3 days. Maybe they will sit in one of the lessons of Imam Ahmed, and then they will say after 3 days, نحن من أهل الحديث, we are from Ahlul Hadith. And that is obviously incorrect. Ahlul Hadith here not meaning Ahlul Hadith, Ahlul Sunnah, Ahlul Haq, lakin from the scholars of Hadith. The Shaykh says, وَالنَّاظِرُ إِلَى حَالِ السَّلَفِ يَرَى عَجَبًا من صبرهم على مرارة التحصيل وطول الجادة لا يفتقرون ولا يتقاطعون ولا يستكبرون شعارهم العلم من المهد إلى اللحد والعلم مع المحمرة إلى المقبرة. So if you look into the Salaf, you say you will find amazing examples how they were patient with their bitterness of seeking knowledge and the longevity of their knowledge or that they've taken or the path that they've taken. And they will not become lazy. And they will not have kibr and haughtiness about them. And their shi'ar or their slogan is what?